it's not, the necessity for civil war isn't embedded in the doctrine.
Yes.
And there's no reason to throw stones at the Muslim world when we could perfectly well look to our own history.
Exactly,
and I do think what we should do is look to our own history. I really believe that. And I believe that we all carry historical guilt for the bloodshed that's preceded the structure of all of our societies. But we, in the West, we look at the Muslim world and we see that it's riven apart. And we wonder, well, I know there's a hypocritical element to that. I'm not claiming that there isn't. It's not like we have our own house in order, but
you have to remember something else. You have to remember there was a colonial reality that existed where Britain, France, and many of the European countries and the Western European extensions, they dominated the Muslim world for the last 200-300 years. And so,
yeah, but I don't think that's a particularly good argument.
No, it's a very good argument.
Well, hang on a sec. I don't want to knock it away completely. Yeah. The rift that I'm talking about, though, was evident far before that. Now, the fact of that colonial complication, that could well be. The fact of that colonial complication could well be a contributor. I know the nation state lines, first of all, were imposed. They were imposed quickly. They were imposed arbitrarily and partly that was a consequence of, what would you say, having to do a lot of things very quickly in the aftermath of a terrible war. I'm not trying to excuse it, but it was complicated. And I know that that's left the Middle East in this, group of nation states that now comprise the world in a very complicated situation. So it's a reasonable point, but the rift was there before. And so...
Well, okay, here's what I'll say to that, yeah? You're right to say that there was arbitrary lines that were drawn, but it's not just that there were arbitrary lines that were drawn. You mentioned the Middle East. Syria, for example, which is where most of the problems are happening now, in terms of the Middle Eastern countries, is probably number one. Maybe Libya number two. But say Syria, for example, they put 3, 4, 5, 10 different factions, all of which have differing understandings of religion, of ideology, of whatever it may be, together. That produced wars. You had Christians in Lebanon fighting Sunnis, Shias fighting Sunnis. And this happened especially after the revolution. A lot of it is political
so it was
factors.
The imposition of a false unity. That's really what happened. Yeah.
If you look at what they're doing now, like look at Lebanon as an example. You have to have a Christian president and a Sunni prime minister and a Shiite, I don't know what it is, first minister or something. I mean, they have systems that try and mitigate these issues, but it's a mess because you're putting people that have different visions of how to run a country together, and there's similar demographics. It's like 30%, 40%, 20%, and so that creates more wars. But they put them together almost on, I would argue, on purpose, to be honest. It's divide and conquer.
If you look at countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway, which are very peaceful and very prosperous, they're also very homogenous. And they're relatively small. So the problem of governance over diversity is much reduced in countries like that. It's simpler for them to be at peace because the culture is relatively homogenous. And so I take your point. It's not easy to bring a true diversity into something approximating a unity, especially when that unity has been, in some sense, arbitrarily imposed and also rapidly and arbitrarily imposed. So that's a reasonable point.
Yeah.